Welcome to Wisdom for the Present, where we take ancient truth and bring it into clear, modern understanding. This episode uses AI-generated narration based on human-researched and written material. So imagine the most powerful man in an entire nation. He is, armed to the teeth. He's backed by a standing army, and physically, he literally towers over everyone in his cabinet.
Right.
And yet he is completely just psychologically paralyzed by a teenager with a sling.
Yeah, that's why.
Today, we are tearing apart this ancient, sweeping narrative of 1 Samuel, specifically chapters 16 through 31. And we aren't doing this to obsess over ancient military tactics or Bronze Age weaponry.
No, definitely not.
We are doing this to figure out why some leaders absolutely crack under the pressure of their own insecurities, while, relative nobodies, forged in the absolute obscurity of the wilderness, rise up to take their thrones. We are diving deep into the ascent of David, the shepherd boy turned king, and simultaneously watching the terrifying, paranoid unraveling of the current king, Saul.
It truly is. It's one of the most masterful, haunting character studies in all of ancient literature. To be honest, to really grasp the gravity of what's happening in these chapters, we kind of have to strip away our 21st century assumptions.
Right.
We have to step right into the dirt and the tension of ancient Israel, because this is a society in a massive, painful transition.
How so?
Well, for generations, they operated as this loose, almost chaotic confederacy of 12 tribes. No central government, no standing army, just local judges who would rise up during a crisis. But now they're trying to centralize.
They demanded a king, right?
Exactly. They demanded a king to be like the surrounding nations. And looming over this fragile new monarchy is the existential daily threat of the Philistines.
And we shouldn't picture the Philistines as just some disorganized band of raiders, right? I mean, they were a highly advanced civilization for that era.
Oh, absolutely. The Philistines were essentially a seafaring people who settled on the coast, and they held a monopoly on ironsmithing. Yeah, so picture an agrarian Israelite militia with, farming tools and a few bronze weapons going up against a highly organized professional military force.
With iron.
Yes, equipped with iron chariots and iron swords. It's a terrifying mismatch. So in that environment, the Israelites believed that survival didn't just depend on military strategy.
Right.
It depended entirely on a divine mandate. The ultimate source of authority, vitality, and courage was understood to be what the text calls the Spirit of the Lord.
Like a literal empowerment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When a leader had that, they possessed an internal fortitude that could overcome any technological disadvantage. But when they lost it, the entire foundation of their leadership crumbled.
Leaving nothing but a hollow shell.
Exactly.
And that hollow shell is exactly where we find King Saul as our deep dive begins today. I mean, Saul still has the crown on his head. He still lives in the palace.
Right. He looks the part.
He does. But he has fundamentally compromised his moral compass through repeated disobedience. And that divine mandate has been torn from him. Which brings us to the prophet Samuel, who is essentially the kingmaker of Israel.
The ultimate authority figure behind the scenes, yeah.
Right. So Samuel's mourning the failure of Saul, but he is told by God to basically wipe his tears, fill a horn with oil, and head to the little farming village of Bethlehem.
Just a tiny, insignificant town.
Yeah. He's told there's a new king waiting among the sons of a man named Jesse. Now, you would think going to anoint a new king would be this joyous occasion, but Samuel is terrified. He literally says, if Saul hears of it, he will kill me.
Which honestly tells you everything you need to know about Saul's state of mind at this point.
Yeah.
He is no longer leading by inspiration. He is leading by pure intimidation. Samuel knows that performing an anointing ritual for a rival king is an act of high treason.
So what does he do?
Well, Samuel goes under the guise of offering a local sacrifice. When he arrives in Bethlehem, the town elders come out trembling.
Why are they trembling?
And because prophets in the ancient Near East weren't just, harmless fortune tellers. They were figures of immense, sometimes volatile authority.
Right, they could bring down judgment.
Exactly, the wrath of God or the wrath of the king. So once Samuel assures them he comes in peace, he invites Jesse and his sons to the sacrifice. And this is where we get the ultimate ancient parade of the impressive resumes.
I love this scene. I mean, it is so incredibly relevant to how we operate today. Jesse brings out his sons, starting with the oldest, Eliab. And the text goes out of its way to describe Eliab's physical presence.
He really does.
He is tall, he is imposing, he's got the jawline, the broad shoulders, the commanding presence. He looks exactly like what a king is supposed to look like.
The central casting version of a king.
Yes. Even the great discerning prophet Samuel takes one look at Eliab and thinks, this is it. Surely the Lord's anointed is standing right here.
Which is so ironic.
Right, because Samuel, who should know better, falls into the exact same trap the nation fell into when they picked Saul, who was famously head and shoulders taller than everyone else.
Yeah.
But God immediately shuts Samuel down.
Yeah, and the phrasing of that rejection is one of the most profound psychological and theological shifts in the ancient text.
What does it say exactly?
God tells Samuel, "Do not look on his face or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For I do not see as man sees. For man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart."
That's huge.
It is a complete inversion of human valuation. We have to remember the cultural context of primogeniture in the ancient Near East here.
Right, the oldest son gets everything.
Exactly. The oldest son inherited everything, the wealth, the authority, the family legacy. The younger sons were essentially just support staff. So Jesse is presenting his sons in the culturally accepted order of their value.
And he brings out 7 impressive sons.
He does, and God rejects all of them. Samuel finally has to ask Jesse, "Are these all the boys you have?"
And Jesse's response is basically, well, there is the youngest, but he's out keeping the sheep.
Yeah. Jesse didn't even think his youngest son was worth inviting to the VIP dinner.
David was literally an afterthought to his own father. And honestly, this is where the text reads us like a modern sociological study. I mean, think about how much of our society is entirely built on outward appearance today.
Oh, almost all of it.
Right. We have algorithmic hiring software that scans resumes for specific keywords and prestige universities before a human ever even looks at them. We have dating apps where human worth is evaluated in a literal fraction of a second based on a curated photo.
It's all about the surface.
Exactly. We have social networks that are essentially digital museums of our outward stature. You know, look at my vacation, look at my success, look at my perfect life.
We constantly want the Eliabs.
We want the Eliabs and we promote the Eliabs. But I want to pause here because there's something in this story that has always felt a bit contradictory to me.
Okay, what's that?
Right after God makes this grand declaration that he doesn't look at the outward appearance, David is finally brought in from the pasture. And the text explicitly describes him.
Right, it says he was ruddy.
Yeah, ruddy, with a handsome face and good appearance. Wait, why even mention his good looks if the entire point of the chapter is that looks don't matter?
That is such a crucial nuance, and honestly, it trips up a lot of readers. But it's not a contradiction. It's really a revelation about the sequence of priority.
What do you mean?
The text isn't arguing that physical attractiveness, charisma, or a stellar resume are inherently evil or something to be ashamed of. Natural gifts are still gifts.
Right. They aren't bad in themselves.
Exactly. What it is saying is that those things are entirely secondary. They are the icing, not the cake. David's employment out in the harsh sun and wind of the Judean hills gave him a rugged, unpretentious vitality.
That ruddiness.
Right. But the core qualification was his internal posture. While his brothers were perhaps resting on the laurels of their birth order, David was out in the isolation of the wilderness.
Tending sheep.
Yes, developing courage, humility, and a deep reliance on God. The heart was already forged. The handsome face was just a surface detail. And there is a beautiful, subtle, physical detail in the anointing itself, actually.
Oh, about the oil.
Yeah. When Samuel anointed Saul years earlier, the text specifically notes he used a glass vial of oil.
A vial?
Right. A vial is manufactured, fragile, brittle, and holds very little. But when Samuel anoints David, he uses a ram's horn of oil.
Well, horn is organic, it's durable, and it holds a massive amount of oil. The brittle vial versus the enduring horn. That is brilliant.
Exactly. It symbolizes a dynasty that will withstand the crushing pressures of leadership, unlike Saul's brittle reign.
So if we pull this into our own lives, the takeaway is just so liberating. I mean, it is the ultimate cure for imposter syndrome.
Absolutely.
You might look around your industry or your classroom or your social circle and think, I don't have the Eliab resume. I don't have the pedigree. I don't look the part. But the text is arguing that the truest qualifications for lasting impact are forged in the unseen places.
Tending the sheep when no one is watching.
Exactly. Doing the unglamorous, faithful work. And you also have to flip that around and ask yourself, who in your organization are you completely overlooking because they don't fit the standard corporate aesthetic of success?
That is a great question. And the moment that durable horn of oil is poured over David, the narrative executes this brutal, whiplash-inducing pivot.
Yeah, the transition is sharp.
The text says the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon David from that day forward. But in the very next breath, it says, the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord rushed upon him and began to torment him.
It's terrifying.
It is.
Yeah.
Saul loses his capacity for decisive action. He descends into paranoia, deep melancholy, and these terrifying fits of rage. He essentially becomes a prisoner in his own mind.
Okay, we absolutely have to stop and unpack that, because for a modern listener, the phrase "an evil spirit from God" is a massive roadblock.
Oh, for sure.
It is deeply uncomfortable and feels so countercultural to anyone who grew up with a purely comforting, benevolent view of the divine. How on earth do we make sense of God sending an evil spirit to torment someone?
It is one of the most challenging phrases in the book, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And to understand it, we have to grasp the ancient Hebrew view of sovereignty.
Okay, lay that out for us.
Modern Western minds often default to a dualistic universe. You know, a cosmic chessboard where God is the white pieces, the devil is the black pieces, and they are fighting this equal battle.
Right, a struggle between two opposing forces.
Exactly. But the ancient Hebrews didn't view the cosmos that way. They believed in an absolute overarching sovereignty where everything, blessings, judgments, the giving of grace, and the terrifying removal of it fell under the ultimate umbrella of God's permission.
Everything.
Everything. In their view, there was no rogue evil operating outside of divine jurisdiction.
So it's not that God is acting maliciously, but rather that God is enacting a severe judgment.
Precisely. Saul had willfully and repeatedly forsaken his fundamental mandate. He chose his own ego over his divine instructions. So the divine assistance, that vitalizing spirit, was withdrawn.
And when it leaves.
When that stabilizing presence leaves, it creates a terrifying vacuum in the human soul. That vacuum is immediately filled by chaos, insecurity, and madness.
Wow.
The evil spirit can be understood as the natural psychological and spiritual torment of a ruler who knows he is an imposter on his own throne.
That makes perfect sense.
He has the crown, but he knows the mandate is gone. It is a self-inflicted hell.
It's the sheer terror of sitting in the corner office, having all the power, but knowing you are fundamentally hollow.
Exactly.
So Saul's servants are terrified of his erratic behavior, and they suggest ancient music therapy. They say, let's find someone skilled at the lyre to play for you when these dark moods hit.
And in an incredible twist of narrative irony, the person they recruit is David.
Right. The newly anointed secret king is brought right into the throne room to play soothing music for the failing paranoid king.
It's like something out of a movie.
It really is. And initially it works. Saul actually loves David. David becomes his armor bearer.
But that proximity is exactly what sets the stage for the tragedy, because the catalyst for the explosion isn't a political maneuver, it's an eruption of pure, unadulterated envy.
And it happens right after David's famous victory over the Philistines, right?
Yeah. When the Israelite army returns home, the women from all the towns come out with tambourines, singing a celebratory song. And the lyrics of that song are the spark that burns down Saul's sanity.
What do they sing?
They sing, Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000.
Ouch. You could almost hear Saul's ego shattering into a million pieces.
Right. The text says Saul was very angry, and the saying displeased him greatly. He mutters to himself, they have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed thousands, and what more can he have but the kingdom?
So he sees the writing on the wall.
He does. And from that exact day forward, the text says, Saul eyed David. He views him entirely through the lens of suspicion and jealousy, and this jealousy quickly turns violent.
How quickly?
The very next day, the dark mood hits Saul. David is doing his job, playing the lyre, trying to bring peace to the room. Saul happens to have a javelin in his hand.
Which is a telling detail, by the way. A king holding a weapon of war in his own private chambers.
Exactly. It shows his paranoia. And he hurls it at David, intending to pin him to the wall.
Envy is a fascinating, terrifying emotion because it literally destroys the container that holds it.
That's a great way to put it.
I mean, Saul has the entire kingdom. He has the royal treasury. He has the armies. But he is consumed by terror. Why? Because the text explicitly notes Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul.
He feels the vacuum.
Yes.
Yeah.
Saul is threatened by the sheer competence and grace of a rising star.
Yeah.
And honestly, if you have ever worked in a toxic environment, this dynamic is painfully familiar.
Oh, absolutely.
You might have a deeply insecure manager or boss. You were just trying to play the liar. You were doing your job well, hitting your metrics, trying to bring success to the team, and your boss starts throwing metaphorical javelins at your head.
Right. They undermine you in meetings. They take credit for your work.
They try to pin you to the wall purely out of their own internal paranoia.
And look at David's response, because it is a masterclass in emotional regulation. The text says David eluded him twice. He slips away.
Doesn't fight back.
Notice what David doesn't do. He doesn't pick the javelin up and throw it back. He doesn't pull rank, even though he knows he's the anointed king.
Right.
He doesn't start a mutiny in the palace. He recognizes that Saul's madness is not his to cure, and he refuses to absorb the poison. He simply steps out of the way.
That right there is the mechanism for surviving toxic leadership. When you are faced with irrational jealousy, the natural human instinct is to defend your honor, right? To pick up the weapon and hurl it right back.
It's what we all want to do.
But the moment you do that, you enter their chaotic reality. You become a javelin thrower. David shows us the immense power of just dodging the weapon and leaving the room. Let their insecurity belong entirely to them. Protect your peace.
It's so true. Now, to fully appreciate how David got into that throne room in the first place, we actually need to rewind slightly to chapter 17.
The famous chapter.
Yes. Because before David is a permanent fixture in Saul's court, he is commuting. He goes back and forth from playing music for the king to feeding his father's sheep in Bethlehem.
Okay, so he's living two lives.
Basically, yeah. And during one of these periods, the Philistines amass their armies for a decisive battle in the valley of Elah, and they deploy a psychological weapon of mass destruction.
A champion named Goliath.
Exactly.
Now, we use the word giant metaphorically all the time today, but the text forces us to look at the raw, terrifying specifications of this man. I mean, Goliath is over 9 feet tall.
Which is just incomprehensible.
It is. He is wearing a coat of scale armor that weighs roughly 150 pounds just on his torso. The shaft of his spear is like a weaver's beam, and the iron head alone weighs 15 pounds.
And his strategy is brilliant.
What does he do?
He doesn't attack. He just walks out into the valley every morning and every evening for 40 days, and he screams at the Israelite lines.
A psychological warfare tactic.
Exactly. He says, "Choose a man, let him come down to me. If he kills me, we will be your servants. If I kill him, you will serve us." And the result is total paralyzing terror.
The entire Israelite army is frozen.
Including King Saul. The man who was drafted specifically because he was the biggest guy in Israel is frozen in fear.
The psychology of fear here is profound and highly calculated on Goliath's part. By standing there for 40 days, Goliath drains the Israelites of their cognitive bandwidth.
That's exactly it.
They aren't thinking about strategy anymore. They are just doing the math. They look at his height, they calculate the weight of his bronze armor, they look at their own rudimentary weapons, and the math says, we will die.
Fear locks us into a purely material assessment of our obstacles.
Right. But then David shows up. He hasn't been drafted. He is essentially the delivery boy.
Delivering smacks.
Literally. Jesse sent him to bring roasted grain, 10 loaves of bread, and 10 cuts of cheese to his older brothers and their commander. So when David arrives at the camp, he hears Goliath deliver his daily taunt.
And his reaction is entirely different from the rest of the army.
Entirely foreign. He asks the men standing near him, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God?"
That phrase, the living God, completely changes the focal length of the lens.
How so?
Well, the entire army of Israel is measuring Goliath against themselves. David looks at Goliath and measures him against God.
Wow.
When you do that, the giant isn't a terrifying monster anymore. He's just a massive target that is too big to miss.
That completely flips the perspective. But before David can even get near the giant, he has to fight a completely different, deeply personal battle, right?
Yeah, with his own family.
His oldest brother, Eliab, the guy who looked like a king but was rejected, hears David asking questions and completely loses his temper.
He explodes.
He verbally attacks David in front of the soldiers. He says, "Why did you come down here? With whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your presumption and the evil of your heart. You just came down to watch the battle."
Eliab's reaction is a textbook example of projection fueled by shame.
Projection?
Yeah, Eliab is a trained soldier, and he is paralyzed by fear. When people are trapped in cowardice or inaction, they deeply resent anyone who refuses to be paralyzed.
Oh, that is so true.
Instead of dealing with his own fear, Eliab attacks David's motives. He tries to reduce David back to the role of the insignificant younger brother watching the few sheep.
He tried to put him back in his box.
Exactly. It is the profound isolation of a visionary. Even your own family might misunderstand and attack you when you step out of the accepted narrative of fear.
But David refuses to take the bait. He essentially says, "What have I done now?" Was it not just a word? He just turns his back on his brother's toxic shame and continues to inquire about fighting the giant until word of this fearless kid reaches King Saul.
And this interaction in Saul's tent is a profound lesson in hidden preparation.
Walk us through it.
Saul looks at this kid who smells like sheep and says, "You can't go fight this Philistine. You are just a youth," and he has been a man of war since his youth.
It's the ultimate gatekeeping moment.
Right. You don't have the required years of experience for this role. But David counters by revealing a resume nobody knew about.
The hidden resume.
Yes. He tells the king, "I was keeping my father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and took a lamb, I went out after it, struck it, and rescued the lamb from its mouth. If it rose up against me, I caught it by the beard and killed it."
That's intense.
David is arguing that the terrifying, lonely battles he fought in the obscurity of the pasture were the exact curriculum required for this public stage.
It is a beautiful testament to the value of hidden preparation. I mean, we live in an era where everyone wants the public victory, right? The viral moment, the massive promotion, without enduring the private testing.
Everyone wants the shortcut.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the skills required to slay giants are forged in the dark, when nobody is applauding, when you are just doing your job and fighting off the lions of your own challenges.
So Saul is desperate enough that he actually agrees to let David go. But then Saul makes a classic managerial error.
Oh, the armor.
Yes. He insists on dressing David in his own royal armor. He puts a bronze helmet on David's head and straps him into a heavy coat of mail. David puts on the king's sword, tries to take a few steps, and he can't even walk.
I love this scene so much because Saul's armor is the ultimate metaphor for conventional wisdom, or what the corporate world calls best practices.
Right.
Logic dictates that if you are fighting a heavily armored tank of a human, you need heavy armor yourself. Saul is trying to impose his methodology, his way of doing things, onto David. But you cannot fight a giant using someone else's strategy.
No, you can't.
Saul's armor was probably the finest in all of Israel, but it didn't fit David. It restricted his mobility. It neutralized his specific, unique strengths.
So David does the bravest thing he can do. He takes off the king's armor.
He opts out of the accepted paradigm.
Exactly. He takes his shepherd's staff, his sling, and goes down to the brook to choose 5 smooth stones. And we really need to correct a massive historical misconception right here.
About the sling.
Yes. When we hear David and Goliath, we picture a little boy with a wooden toy slingshot going up against a tank. That is entirely wrong.
What were they actually like?
In the ancient world, slingers were the artillery. Roman medical texts actually have instructions on how to remove sling bullets from bodies because they embedded themselves like modern shrapnel.
Oh, wow. So it was lethal.
Very. A trained slinger could hurl a stone at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour with pinpoint accuracy. David isn't bringing a toy to a knife fight. He is bringing a sniper rifle.
So it wasn't really a miracle of physics. It was tactical brilliance.
He recognized that engaging Goliath in hand-to-hand combat wearing heavy armor was suicide. But utilizing speed, distance, and lethal projectile force, that was a winning strategy.
He completely changed the rules of the engagement. So what armor are you wearing right now because an industry standard or a well-meaning mentor told you that you had to wear it?
It's a great reflection.
Are you trying to solve a massive problem in your life using the exact same conventional methods that are currently failing everyone else? Sometimes the most strategic move is to take off the heavy armor of expectation, pick up the unique tools you actually know how to use, and step onto the battlefield.
And of course, David's strategy works flawlessly. He sinks a single stone into Goliath's exposed forehead, the giant falls, and the psychological spell over Israel is broken. They completely rout the Philistines.
But as we discussed earlier, this massive public triumph is the exact event that accelerates Saul's paranoia, leading to the javelin throwing.
Yes, back to the toxic court.
The court becomes an incredibly dangerous place for David. And it is right here, in the middle of this toxic, cutthroat political environment, that we witness the emergence of one of the most remarkable relationships in recorded history. Enter Jonathan.
Jonathan is King Saul's oldest son.
Right. And by every law of the ancient world, Jonathan is the crown prince. The throne belongs to him. He should be the one most threatened by David's meteoric rise.
But instead, the text says that the soul of Jonathan was bound to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. He recognizes the divine mandate on David.
The depth of Jonathan's character is staggering to me. He actively and willingly dismantles his own upward mobility for the sake of truth.
He really does. He initiates a formal covenant with David. And to seal this covenant, Jonathan does something with immense legal and symbolic weight in the ancient Near East.
Giving him the clothes, right?
Yes. He strips off his royal robe and gives it to David. He also gives him his armor, his sword, his bow, and his belt.
That's a massive statement.
It is. In ancient cultures, garments were deeply tied to identity and authority. By transferring his royal clothing and weapons to David, Jonathan is legally and publicly transferring his claim to the throne.
He is basically saying, I know you are the true king, and I choose to be your second in command.
Exactly.
It's mind-blowing. I mean, in today's hyper-competitive world where we are constantly told to build our personal brand, to ruthlessly climb the ladder, to never let anyone take our spot, Jonathan's behavior looks like literal career suicide.
To most people, yes.
Who actually hands their guaranteed promotion to their rival. Is this just hopelessly idealistic?
Well, it certainly looks like career suicide to Saul. Saul later screams at Jonathan, telling him that as long as David lives, Jonathan's kingdom will not be established. Saul is terrified of losing power.
Right. Saul is playing the traditional political game.
But Jonathan is operating on a transcendent value system. He recognizes that trying to force a destiny that God has not authored will only end in destruction.
It's profound.
By choosing genuine love and integrity over selfish ambition, Jonathan secures a legacy that outlasts Saul's paranoia. He chooses to be on the side of truth, even if it costs him a crown.
And he repeatedly risks his life for this friendship. They even devise this brilliant secret code to keep David safe.
The arrows in the field.
Right. David is hiding out in a field, and Jonathan goes to a royal banquet to test his father's mood. When Saul realizes David is absent, he flies into a murderous rage and actually hurls a spear at his own son for defending David.
The javelins aren't just for David anymore.
Exactly. So Jonathan leaves the table in fierce anger. The next morning, he goes out to the field where David is hiding near a stone called Ezel.
And he brings the servant boy?
Yes, Jonathan brings a young servant boy and shoots 3 arrows. He shouts to the boy, "The arrows are beyond you." That specific phrase was the prearranged code telling David that the king's intent was murder, and David had to run for his life.
They share a tearful goodbye, and David's life as a comfortable courtier is officially over. He is now a fugitive.
If we translate this relationship to today, it highlights the stark difference between networking and true friendship. Networking is inherently transactional, right? I will help you so you can help me advance.
A mutual benefit arrangement.
Exactly. But true friendship, Jonathan-level friendship, desires the absolute best for the other person, even if their success eclipses your own.
It requires a level of internal security that is exceedingly rare. And it's a very good thing David had that emotional anchor, because as he flees from Saul, we enter the darkest phase of his life.
The messy middle.
Yes. David is no longer the triumphant giant slayer. He is a terrified, starving refugee running for his life in the wilderness. And frankly, this is where the narrative gets ethically murky.
Very murky. I mean, David arrives at the city of Nob, which is a priestly settlement. He is alone, he has no weapons, and he is desperate. He meets Ahimelech the priest, who is trembling, asking why the king's son-in-law is traveling alone.
And David lies.
He looks him in the eye and flat out lies. He says, "The king has charged me with a highly classified secret mission, and my men are meeting me later. Do you have any food?" The only food Ahimelech has is the bread of the presence, the holy showbread.
And we really need to explain the weight of this for the modern reader.
Go for it.
In the tabernacle, there was a table holding 12 loaves of bread, representing the 12 tribes of Israel before God. By strict Levitical law, this bread was holy and could only be eaten by the priests inside the sanctuary.
So it was absolutely forbidden for David to eat it.
Right. But Ahimelech, believing David is on an urgent royal mission, makes a pastoral decision to bend the ritual law to preserve human life. He gives David the holy bread.
He also gives him a weapon, right?
Yes, the only weapon they have stored there, the sword of Goliath, the very giant David killed. And it's fascinating because centuries later, Jesus actually references this exact moment to argue that human need supersedes strict ritual observance.
Oh, wow. But the immediate consequences of David's lie are catastrophic here. Because hiding in the shadows of the sanctuary that day is a man named Doeg the Edomite, Saul's chief herdsman.
Doeg is the ultimate political opportunist.
Right. Later, when Saul is having a paranoid breakdown, accusing all his servants of conspiring against him, Doeg steps up to curry favor.
He tells Saul what he saw.
He tells Saul that he saw Ahimelech conspiring with David, giving him food and a sword. Saul summons Ahimelech and his entire priestly family.
And Ahimelech defends himself honestly. He says he thought he was helping the king's most loyal servant. He had no idea David was a fugitive.
But Saul doesn't care. He is so far gone in his madness that he orders his royal guard to slaughter the priests.
And this is amazing. The Israelite guards refuse.
They won't touch the priests of God.
Right, they still have a moral compass. So Saul turns to Doeg the Edomite. There is a long history of hostility between Edom and Israel, and Doeg has no qualms about shedding Israelite blood.
He steps forward and massacres 85 priests.
And then he goes to Nob and slaughters the entire town, men, women, children, and livestock. It is an absolute atrocity.
When one single priest, Abiathar, escapes and reaches David in the wilderness to tell him what happened, David is crushed. He says, "I knew on that day that Doeg would surely tell Saul, 'I have brought about the death of every person in your father's house.'"
David bears the horrific blood guilt of his deception.
He really does. But his desperation doesn't end there. He is so terrified of Saul that he flees Israel entirely and crosses into enemy territory.
He goes to Gath.
Which is insane because Gath is the hometown of Goliath.
I know, it's a terrible plan.
He tries to seek asylum with King Achish, but the Philistine commanders immediately recognize him. They say, "Isn't this the guy they sing about? The one who killed 10,000s of us?"
So David realizes he has walked straight into a death trap.
Exactly. So, to survive, he pretends to be completely insane. He starts scrabbling and making marks on the doors of the city gate, letting saliva run down his beard.
And we have to understand the ancient Near Eastern view of madness to know why this actually worked.
It wasn't just seen as a medical issue, right?
No, in that culture, severe mental illness was often viewed as a curse from the gods. Harming a madman was considered bad luck. It could bring the curse upon you.
Oh, I see.
So King Achish looks at David drooling on the gate, and he isn't threatened anymore. He's disgusted. He famously says, "Look, the man is mad. Why bring him to me? Do I lack madmen in my own house?"
And he kicks David out, inadvertently saving his life. David escapes to the cave of Adullam.
Which brings up a massive obstacle for people reading this text.
Definitely. I mean, how on earth can a man who lies to a priest, inadvertently causes a massacre, drools on a gate to save his own skin, and later lives a double life as a mercenary, how can he be considered a hero of faith?
It forces us to distinguish between enduring moral wisdom and the brutal survivalism of the ancient world.
Yeah.
The biblical narrative is exceptionally unique because it absolutely refuses to sanitize his heroes. It does not present David as a flawless avatar of virtue.
He's incredibly messy.
He is a deeply flawed human being who makes grave moral errors when pushed to the brink of survival. But what we are witnessing here is a classic archetype, the hero's descent.
Descent before the rise.
Exactly. Before a leader can truly ascend and govern justly, they often must be stripped of their ego, their reputation, and their self-reliance. David is reduced to living in a dirt cave.
And who joins him there?
He is joined by 400 men who the text describes as being in distress, in debt, and discontented.
The outcasts of society.
Right. David has to learn how to lead broken people while he himself is deeply broken.
That is such a vital practice for how we view leaders in history today. We have to learn to hold the tension. People can be profoundly gifted, chosen for a purpose, and yet deeply painfully flawed at the exact same time.
You can't demand absolute perfection.
Right. If you demand absolute spotless perfection from your heroes, you will be constantly disillusioned. But the reason David remains compelling is that amidst these dark, morally compromised moments, he suddenly exhibits flashes of breathtaking integrity.
And we see this clearly in two separate, incredibly tense moments where David has the perfect opportunity to assassinate Saul.
Let's talk about the first one. It occurs in the wilderness of En-Gedi.
Yes, Saul is obsessively hunting David with 3,000 elite troops. Nature calls, and Saul goes into a cave to relieve himself.
And in a staggering coincidence, it happens to be the exact same cave where David and his men are hiding in the deep, dark recesses.
Saul is completely vulnerable, blinded by the sudden darkness of the cave.
And David's men are whispering to him, "This is the day. The Lord has delivered your enemy into your hand. Kill him and take the throne."
They are providing David with full theological justification to murder his abuser.
Right, they're saying God set this up. So David creeps forward in the dark. He has his knife drawn. He is inches away from the man who has ruined his life. But instead of plunging the knife into Saul's back, he just silently cuts off the corner of Saul's royal robe.
And even that minor act of rebellion strikes him to the core.
His conscience is smitten.
Yeah. He realizes that by vandalizing the royal robe, he has dishonored the office. He turns to his men and says, "The Lord forbid that I should put out my hand against my Lord, the Lord's anointed."
He physically restrains his desperate men from attacking Saul.
He does. And after Saul leaves the cave, David follows him out at a safe distance, bows with his face to the earth, and holds up the severed piece of cloth.
Proving he had him.
Right. He says, "Look, I could have killed you, but I spared you. I have not sinned against you, yet you hunt my life. May the Lord judge between me and you, but my hand will not be upon you."
He quotes an ancient proverb, doesn't he?
He does. Out of the wicked comes wickedness. Essentially saying, I am not a wicked man, so I will not use wicked methods to gain my crown.
It is stunning restraint. And the exact same dynamic plays out again in chapter 26 in the wilderness of Ziph.
A very similar setup.
Right. David and his fierce nephew Abishai sneak into the very center of Saul's military camp at night. God has put a deep sleep on the entire army. Saul is asleep with his spear stuck in the ground right next to his head.
And Abishai begs David.
He says, "God has given your enemy into your hand. Let me pin him to the earth with one stroke of the spear. I won't need to strike twice."
It's so tempting.
But David refuses again. He takes the spear and Saul's water jug as proof, retreats to a distant hill, and wakes the camp by shouting, proving once again that he values the integrity of the process more than the immediacy of the prize.
David deeply understands that Saul is currently the permitted authority, despite his madness. To assassinate Saul would be to seize the throne through violence and rebellion, tainting his own future dynasty.
So he decides to wait.
He tells Abishai that eventually the Lord will strike Saul, or his day will come to die naturally, or he will fall in battle. But David refuses to preempt divine providence. He refuses to force his destiny.
Think about how hard that is. Imagine you have a bitter rival at work, someone who has lied about you, tried to ruin your reputation, made your life a living nightmare.
We've all known someone like that.
Right. And suddenly, by pure accident, you stumble upon their unlocked laptop, or you find an email that exposes a massive, career-ending mistake they made.
The ultimate gotcha moment.
Exactly. You could leak it, ruin them, and take their job, and everyone around you would probably say karma. They deserved it. Stepping back from that laptop, choosing to let integrity win over vindictiveness, is incredibly difficult.
It requires immense character.
But it is the difference between ambitious striving and trusting the process. You do not have to crush your enemies to step into your purpose.
It is a profound lesson. But, the irony of human nature is how quickly we can forget our own principles when our ego gets bruised in a different way.
Oh, absolutely. Which brings us to the events of chapter 25, sandwiched right between these two moments of incredible restraint. David nearly ruins everything over a wounded ego.
Right. Enter Nabal the fool.
So David is operating in the wilderness of Paran. There's a very wealthy rancher named Nabal, whose name literally translates to fool.
A fitting name.
Very. The text describes him as surly and mean in his dealings. Now, David and his armed men had been essentially acting as an unofficial security force in the region, protecting Nabal's shepherds and flocks from desert raiders.
Which was a common arrangement.
Right. It's sheep shearing time, which is a massive festival and a time of legendary hospitality. So David sends 10 young men to politely ask Nabal for a voluntary contribution of food, essentially saying, "We protected your guys all season. Can you spare some provisions for us?"
In the ancient Near East, failing to show hospitality during shearing time, especially to those who had protected your assets, was a massive social breach.
A huge insult.
But Nabal goes beyond just saying no. He intentionally insults David's honor.
What does he say?
He sneers at the messengers. Who is David? Who is the son of Jesse? There are many servants these days who are breaking away from their masters. Shall I take my bread and my water and my meat and give it to men who come from I do not know where?
He is calling David a runaway slave, an illegitimate outlaw. When the messengers return and report this to David, he completely loses his mind. He doesn't pray. He doesn't show restraint. He just barks, "Every man put on his sword."
A total overreaction.
David straps on his own sword and marches out with 400 heavily armed men, swearing an oath that he will slaughter every single male in Nabal's household before dawn. It's wild. He just showed superhuman restraint with Saul, actively hunting him, but he is ready to commit a massacre over a verbal insult from a grumpy, wealthy civilian.
What is happening psychologically here?
You gotta explain that.
It is a brilliant, realistic depiction of ego regression and trauma triggers.
Trauma triggers.
Yes. Saul was an established authority figure. Sparing him was a matter of high theology and statecraft. But Nabal is a civilian who insulted David's core identity and legitimacy.
Oh, I see.
When you are living in the wilderness, under constant stress, stripped of your title, your honor is all you have left. Nabal poked the deepest insecurity David had, that he was just a runaway slave, not a future king.
So David's trauma response flares up.
He loses all perspective and is about to commit an atrocity that would have permanently stained his future reign with the blood of innocent people. This is exactly why leaders desperately need truth-tellers in their lives, people who can intercept them when they are blinded by rage.
And that truth-teller is Nabal's wife, Abigail.
She is incredible.
One of the servants runs to her, warns her of Nabal's foolishness, and tells her an army is coming to slaughter them. The text describes Abigail as intelligent and beautiful. She doesn't panic.
She mobilizes.
She loads up a caravan of donkeys with 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, roasted grain, 100 clusters of raisins, and 200 cakes of figs.
She is practically bringing a grocery store.
She rides out to intercept David's furious militia. When she sees him, she leaps off her donkey, bows to the ground, and delivers what might be the greatest masterclass in emotional intelligence and de-escalation in the entire text.
Her speech is rhetorically flawless. First, she takes the blame upon herself, even though she wasn't even present for the insult.
Taking the heat out of the room.
Exactly. Then, she validates David's anger, but reframes the target. She tells him to ignore Nabal because he is just acting according to his nature, a fool. But the true brilliance of Abigail's intervention is how she speaks to David's identity.
How does she do that?
She doesn't address him as an angry outlaw. She speaks to him as the inevitable future king of Israel. She reminds him of his highest destiny.
Right.
She says, "The Lord will certainly make my Lord a sure house, because my Lord is fighting the battles of the Lord. And when the Lord has done to my Lord according to all the good that he has spoken concerning you, my Lord shall have no cause of grief or pangs of conscience for having shed blood without cause."
She treats him like the king he is meant to be, which basically shocks him out of acting like the petty warlord he is currently being.
Precisely. She reminds him that his life is bound in the bundle of the living in the care of the Lord your God. She tells him to let God deal with his enemies, just as he did with Saul.
And David immediately snaps out of his rage.
He realizes how close he came to a massive moral failure. He blesses her discretion, accepts the massive provisions, and turns his army around.
And Nabal's fate.
10 days later, Nabal actually suffers what appears to be a stroke or a heart attack and dies, and God handles the justice. David later marries Abigail.
The practical application of Abigail's strategy is staggering. Think about how we usually handle conflict. When someone is spiraling in anger, our instinct is to match their energy or just argue facts and logic.
Which almost never works.
Right. Abigail shows us the art of de-escalation. You don't match the anger. You bring provisions, you meet their immediate needs, and then you speak to their potential.
You interrupt the cycle of offense.
By addressing the furious person with unmerited respect, reminding them of their own core values and the long-term consequences of their actions. Be the Abigail in your workplace. Speak to who people can be, not how they are currently acting.
Which brings us to the final sweeping act of this narrative. Chapters 28, 30, and 31 show us the ultimate divergent destinations of King Saul and David.
The final paths.
Yes. They are both about to face the absolute darkest crisis of their lives. They both hit rock bottom simultaneously. But how they respond to the darkness defines their ultimate legacy.
Let's follow Saul's path first. The Philistines have gathered a massive, overwhelming army at Shunem.
The biggest threat he's faced yet.
Right. Saul looks out at their camp, and the text says he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly. He's completely devoid of the Spirit of the Lord. He tries to inquire of God for a strategy, but he gets nothing.
The text says God did not answer him by dreams, nor by Urim, nor by prophets. Total deafening silence.
And we should clarify what the Urim means here.
Right. The Urim and Thummim were essentially sacred stones kept in the breastpiece of the high priest. They were used to cast lots to receive a binary yes or no answer from God in times of national crisis.
But remember, Saul slaughtered the priests at Nob.
Exactly. The surviving priest Abiathar fled to David with the ephod, the priestly garment. So Saul is cut off from legitimate divine communication.
He isolated himself.
In his frantic desperation to assert control, he breaks his own laws. Years earlier, he had righteously banished all mediums, necromancers, and those who consult the dead from Israel.
But now?
Now, suffocating in the silence, he disguises himself, strips off his royal robes, and goes by night to the village of Endor to find a woman who can conjure the dead.
It is the ultimate picture of a leader completely unraveling. He asks the medium to bring up the spirit of his old mentor, Samuel, who has recently died. And miraculously, terrifyingly, an apparition of Samuel actually appears.
The medium screams in shock. She wasn't expecting it to actually work.
But if Saul was hoping for a comforting word from beyond the grave, he is brutally disappointed. Samuel's ghost is relentless.
What does he say?
He tells Saul that the Lord has become his enemy, that the kingdom has been torn from his hand and given to David, and that by tomorrow Saul and his sons will be dead, and Israel will be handed over to the Philistines.
And the psychological weight of that prophecy physically breaks Saul. The text says he falls his full length on the earth.
He hasn't eaten all day. His strength is gone, and he is paralyzed by despair.
The medium, in a deeply ironic twist, shows him more pastoral care than he has shown anyone in years.
She urges him to eat. She kills a fattened calf, bakes unleavened bread, and feeds him. Saul eats this bleak, tragic last meal in the dark, and then marches out into the night to face his doom on Mount Gilboa.
Now, contrast that terrifying descent into despair with David's path.
Let's do that.
While Saul is at Endor, David has been marching with the Philistine army, pretending to be loyal to King Achish. But the Philistine commanders don't trust him, so they send him away.
So David and his 600 men endure a grueling 3-day march back to their base city of Ziklag. And when they crest the hill, they are met with a nightmare.
What happened?
While they were gone, the Amalekites raided the Negev. They burned Ziklag to the ground. And they took every single person captive, the wives, the sons, the daughters. Everything is gone.
The grief of these hardened warriors must have been unimaginable.
The text says, David and his men raised their voices and wept until they literally had no more physical power left to weep.
And then the grief metastasizes into rage.
Right. The men, David's loyal 600 who have suffered in the wilderness with him, turn on him. They are so bitter in soul over the loss of their children that they start talking about stoning David to death.
This is David's Endor moment. Everything has burned down, his family is gone, and his closest allies are about to murder him. He's entirely alone.
But instead of turning to frantic control or forbidden magic like Saul, David does something profound. The text says, "But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God."
That phrase is the hinge of David's survival. He grounds himself, he doesn't panic, and he doesn't lash out at his men.
He calls for Abiathar the priest and asks him to bring the ephod. Unlike Saul, who had alienated the priesthood, David has maintained a relationship with the divine mechanisms.
He inquires of God, "Shall I pursue after this band? Shall I overtake them?"
And God answers clearly, "Pursue, for you shall surely overtake and shall surely rescue."
So David takes decisive action. He mobilizes the 600 men, and they march out so relentlessly that by the time they reach the brook Bisor, 200 of his men physically collapse.
They are too exhausted to cross the water.
Right. So David leaves them there to guard the baggage and presses on with the remaining 400.
Along the way, they find an Egyptian slave in a field. He has been abandoned by his Amalekite master because he got sick.
And David stops. He shows mercy, gives him water, bread, figs, and raisins.
And that act of compassion pays off because the revived slave leads David directly to the Amalekite camp.
They find the Amalekites spread out over the landscape, partying, eating, and drinking because of the massive spoil they had taken. David attacks them at twilight and fights until the evening of the next day.
It's a total victory. David recovers absolutely everything, every wife, every child, and massive amounts of plunder.
But the true test of David's leadership happens on the march back home.
Right. They return to the brook Besor, where the 200 exhausted men had stayed behind with the supplies.
And some of the harsher, more selfish fighters in David's ranks speak up. They say, "Because these guys didn't go with us, we will not give them any of the spoil that we recovered. Just give them back their wives and children and tell them to leave."
It's the classic survivor's mentality. I did the hard work, I get the reward.
But David implements a revolutionary principle of equity here. He overrules the harshmen, not with anger, but with theological perspective.
What does he say?
He says, "You shall not do so, my brothers, with what the Lord has given us. He has preserved us and given the band that came against us into our hands. For as his share is who goes down into the battle, so shall his share be who stays by the baggage. They shall share alike.
David legally decrees that the support staff, the unseen workers, the ones who were too physically broken to fight, but still held the line and guarded the supplies, receive an equal share of the reward.
It is a phenomenal leadership principle. Finding resilience when everything burns down is one thing, but recognizing that the baggage handlers are just as vital to the organization as the frontline warriors, that is how you build a lasting kingdom.
When you get your power back, how do you treat the exhausted and the marginalized?
Exactly.
So we have traced this incredible, brutal journey. We've watched the tragic collapse of Saul on Mount Gilboa, where he ultimately falls on his own sword. And we've watched David navigate the wilderness to emerge as the true king. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final, provocative thought to mull over.
The very end of chapter 31 offers a hauntingly beautiful coda to Saul's tragic life.
Yes. After Saul dies, the Philistines find his body. In a gruesome display of dominance, they cut off his head, strip off his armor, and fasten his headless body to the wall of a city called Beth-shan to mock Israel. It is the ultimate indignity.
But then, the men of a town called Jabesh-Gilead hear about what the Philistines have done.
These men mobilize. They march all night, sneak across enemy lines at immense personal risk, take the bodies of Saul and his sons off the wall, and bring them back to Jabesh to give them a dignified burial and fast for 7 days.
Why on earth would they risk their lives for a failed, mad king who lost the kingdom?
Because decades earlier, at the very dawn of his reign, Saul's first major military victory was saving the city of Jabesh-Gilead from having their right eyes gouged out by an enemy force.
It is a profound, staggering testament to the enduring power of past kindness. Saul ruined his own life, he ruined his family, and he lost the mandate of God. But the men of Jabesh never forgot the man who saved them when they were helpless.
It reminds us that even in a life marked by massive failure, the seeds of genuine goodness you plant are never entirely forgotten. That's the heart of this section. This is Wisdom for the Present, where understanding leads to clarity, and clarity shapes how we see and live. We'll see you in the next episode.